Hey guys, it's Tiny Tom Logan back with another video for you, and today I finally managed to procure a sample of the Sapphire Nitro X, Nitro Plus Vapor. There's too many X's and all of those kind of things in these names. So let's try and be professional. It is the VaporX Nitro Plus overclock model from Sapphire, and it's the RX 7900 XTX. Lots of X's. I feel like I want to rip off other people's ideas and have X graphs. Anyway, today I do need to say thank you to the boys over at OCUK or Overclockers UK. I know that's quite similar to Overclock 3D, but we are not affiliated. But I had been trying to get my hands on one of these, and press samples had just been ultra limited. But thankfully they decided that they'd actually like me to review it. So I was like, amazing! So I'm actually really excited to get hold of this because Sapphire are one of the kind of hallowed go-to brands when it comes to the AMD graphics card scene. And if I'm completely honest, this thing looks the absolute nuts. Now, if you haven't seen one before, you may have been living in a cave or under a rock or something, because it's actually so very, very nice. Now, the first thing I would like to say about this is there are actually two RGB panels on it. Now, I know some of you out there are going to go, we don't care about RGB, but you do need to remember that you can change them to just white lights if you want to help sort of light other parts within your system. And if you don't like it at all, you can turn it off. And that's completely down to you. But there are two RGB panels. There's one very visible when you mount it like this on the outside, where you would expect it, and it's where everybody else puts it as well. But there is another one on the bottom of the graphics card. Now, I know a lot of you straight away are going to say, what's the point? It's lighting up the motherboard. Well, a lot of people nowadays are moving into this strange and hallowed thing called vertical mount graphics cards. And rather than having the light at the top, just where, you know, obviously you can see it, it does mean that you can light downwards when you've got your graphics card mounted vertically as well. Now, you might say, why have you not done it for the review? But this case doesn't really lend itself to it that well. But you never know where it might pop up in the next few weeks. Anyway, so you do have those two very strong RGB panels. Now, they're kind of like diffused, and they've got like a frosted effect to it, which makes it really nice. It also does mean when you do a soft focus for the AMD or play with lights and stuff, that it can actually look really pretty. So there's a little bit more RGB lighting the backplate up, but that's pretty much it. It's fairly simplistic. Couple of panels on it, easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Right, so other things to point out, and this was one of the things that I found really quite interesting, and it made me smile because it shows that they've actually bothered and wanted to make this very strong as well. And that a lot of you do get like braces that hold the cards, and you know, we're used to things going down the side of the graphics cards trying to hold everything up. But the brace for this card is actually the cooler for the VRMs and the memory and everything as well. So it runs the entire length of the card. And then it also wraps around the back as well. It's quite literally an entire piece. And if you have a look at it, it's a fairly thick chunk of aluminium as well. And then you've pretty much just got the fans dangled off of that. And the actual heatsink where the heat pipes are and the heatsink fins is separate. But that section is just one chunky lump of metal to hopefully keep everything in play. Now, it does make the card very heavy and strong. But in reality, the one thing I will say about the way it looks in this system today, that it's got a little bit of a lean to it, isn't actually the graphics card's fault, because the graphics card, you can hold it on the end and it does not move at all. It's actually moving in my PCI Express slot. Now, you do need to remember, I have probably reviewed maybe near to 100 graphics cards through this system, and they're in and out an awful lot, so it's getting a little bit tired, and we do need to retire it soon. But it's still being very valiant in its service, and I feel like Bojo when I say that, which is awful. I should stop doing that. But anyway, so it's actually not the graphics card's fault. You could give it a little bit of a push up here, and I can almost feel my other half when she's working with clients at a salon saying that they need a bit of a lift, and that's all this needs, and it's just because some of the board's just not quite strong enough for it. If you've got a new system or something like that, you won't have a problem. I just thought I would explain that. Anyway, 3 8-pin power, none of this 12 volt VPR drama stuff. Old school 3 8-pins. Now I know a lot of you are going to say that's a massive amount of cables and stuff, and if you're lazy about it, yes, it's just a massive amount of cables. But if you are buying a graphics card for aesthetics, then obviously then you've got the ability to be able to make those cables a feature. You can hide them a lot easier if you want though, because you haven't necessarily got to worry too much about bend radiuses, although they are all the same. You just need to be semi-sensible. If you've got it vertically, you can go off around the back and you haven't got to see it. If you end up fitting it like this, you can obviously make the cables much more of a feature than I have, because I can't change them for everything. So this is literally just a test system, and we all do need to remember that. Backplate, I kind of like the little perforations on it. Makes me feel and think a little bit more like leather, weirdly. You know, like the little perforations in the steering wheel. Anyway, it does make me think that. And I also like the fact that they've not just chucked black at everything. It is gunmetal grey. I actually see a really big future. We've had black, which was what everyone uses, and then everyone went white, and I genuinely do see grey becoming a big feature point for cases and hardware and stuff moving forward. I know some people are trying to do silver, but I'm not being funny, silver is not grey, silver is lazy. It's what manufacturers do when they're trying to do white and they can't be bothered, because white's actually quite difficult, apparently. And that's why I think grey is actually a really brave choice. Now, the massive heatsink on this, you will be thinking amazing temps, so we will bring the temperature graph up. Now, it is warmer than the XFX, but in reality, I think it's a chosen choice that they're literally letting it get that warm rather than them cooling it down, because genuinely this does not make any noise at all, and I have punished it. So I think that 60-degree threshold is a chosen choice. You could lower it if you wanted. Your fan speeds would just go up, as they did with the XFX, to keep it in check. So, big meaty heatsink underneath everything that's going on, does the trick, means that the fans haven't got to spin as much, and it means the manufacturers, even when I've battered it for hours and hours and hours, still only got 60-degree temperatures. Now that's even more of a achievement when I show you the power graph, because this literally uses the most out of any AMD GPU that I have tested. Now, it does that because of the power limit that's built within it, and that does mean that you then would get the possibility of opening up the taps and going crazy with an overclock. Now, I did do some overclocking with this, and it got me to the same kind of levels that I achieved with the other graphics cards. So that extra bonkers power limit isn't necessarily going to do you any favours unless you do win the silicon lottery. Now, the silicon lottery is just, not all silicon is the same. You can take 7900 XTXs, and there will be the odd few within that pack that will just overclock better. You'll also get some that are just cooler. You'll also get some that are just weirdly faster for no reason but do not overclock. It's kind of like personalities. Everyone's is slightly different, and there's only so much that you can dress someone up before the personality kind of comes out. Which is why some of you don't like me. Anyway, so power, temperatures. When we got on to like the overclocking, as I've shown, it did fairly similar to what we've already experienced. Now, some of you have been saying it's because the rig is bottlenecked. It is old. We are still using a 3950X, but that means we can then backwards test, and is compatible with all the tests that we've done for such a long time. But the thing to remember is if it was that badly bottlenecked, when we put a faster card in, as in maybe a newer AMD or maybe 4090, the scores would stay exactly the same, and they don't. Now, it is still slightly held back by that CPU, but we do have things in place now where we are going to be changing this soon, but it's a good few weeks work of just testing all the old graphics cards again in entirety. It's not something that can just be done in a couple of days. But anyway, so if it was bottlenecked that badly, all the cards would perform exactly the same, every single one of them. Not necessarily just the 7900 XTXs. Now, these have performed fairly similarly across the board, and I think that's the automatic overclocking going on where they push themselves to the limits. That is the reason why they're doing that. You can overclock it yourself and you will get a few extra frames, but in reality, I think if it was me, I'd want to turn the memory up a little bit, turn the power slider up a bit, undervolt it a little bit, and then pretty much leave the clock speeds to its own devices. Get it cool, get it calm, get it collected, get it stable, enjoy it. Don't think about it too much. Performance-wise, throughout, pretty much the way it went is you had the odd one where the standard AMD one did well, but pretty much it was either the Sapphire or the XFX that was winning out in the AMD battle. And I don't think that's a bad place to be, because it was the top flight XFX versus the top flight Sapphire. And I think that's a very valiant play. Out of the two, if I'm completely honest, I do like the monochrome side of the XFX, but I did say that the silver kind of made it feel a little bit cheap on it, and I did wish that they'd just gone black on the back plate and kept the silver line around the actual cooler itself. And I actually do like the RGB on this that little bit more as well. I mean, if you're into silver, then fair enough, but I think they could have done a few more tweaks on that to aesthetically make it that tiny little bit more appealing. But then again, aesthetics is down to the person at the end of the day. But the most important thing is you've got two slightly differing cards when it comes to aesthetics, but the performance is pretty much there or thereabouts. The design of the PCB and the cooling is definitely getting the best from the core on the chip, and that's all you can really ask for. And it does mean that if you have a choice, you have two very safe places to go for your performance. Now, that is my review for this. I'm actually really glad that I managed to get one finally in to get testing, but I don't want to say too much just yet, but it's not the last that you're going to be seeing of the Sapphire, because I have some funky things planned over the next week or two in amongst the other reviews that I need to do. You will be seeing this again, but it might not look like that. Anyway, we are going to give this the OC 3D Enthusiast Award. I feel like I've not been talking about awards enough recently, but for now at least, this is the tiniest one out. Ding! Love you, sis.